amounts of money have the power he wields. He has the power to wield Jeff Biden. They paid him. They gave him the opportunity. They gave him money over
I'm sure they give money to all
lockdown.
The people that are likely to be in power, don't they? What's changed though, Sandy? Because you only need to get out of London. Well, just walk out of this studio for 5 minutes, and I'm in areas that are owned by one man. The Duke of Westminster owns most of the West End of London. I can head out to Chelsea, and you've got the Earl of Cadogan, who's quids in over there, the Crown Estate. It's not exactly new to see an accumulation of epic wealth in the hands of one.
It's taken 40 years.
Yeah, but what's changed? What happened 40 years ago that has created the Jeff Bezoses of this world, and what would the world look like if it hadn't happened?
It was deregulation.
Well, I know you've already used that word, and I don't want to heck to you, but you're going to have to tell my listeners a little bit more than a word. Examples of what happened.
Beg your pardon.
That's all right.
It was to do with the markets being given the opportunity to have control, and for government control to be lessened. With respect, we don't really know you and me, do we? We know that deregulation is a bad thing, and we know that it has allowed a rapacious profiteering to the exclusion. But minimum wage legislation didn't exist 40 years ago, Sandy. Right.
That's control. That's regulation. I'm pretty sure you're right, because it's a narrative I've heard a lot myself, but we don't know. And that's the real answer to the question.
Oh, gosh. I suppose the way that I speak is that I sound as though I know everything, but actually I don't.
No.
And all the things I do, and nor do you. And all the things we do know are just revealing the things that we don't know.
Something must have happened to allow companies to accrue such enormous amounts of money while paying their staff a pittance, because we feel that in the post-war period from 45 to 80, that wouldn't have been allowed to happen. We know that in the pre-war period, and certainly in the 19th century, it was absolutely commonplace. You know, you just look at the houses that these people were living in compared to the living conditions of their workers.
It was feudalism, and it's back to being feudalism.
To the mills. Yeah, so there was some recalibrating of the social contract post-war with Aneurin Bevan and Clement Attlee and people like that, and then you look at people like Jacob Rees-Mogg and you reflect upon how much they must hate it. They want to go back to Victorian ideals. But in many ways, when you look at Jeff Bezos and the warehouse workers in Tilbury, you think, actually, we are already back in the Victorian era.
Exactly. So to answer your question about giving you something more than the word deregulation, I would need more than it takes of your programme to actually sit and talk. I'd love to have a cup of tea with you, but it would last for a long time.
Seen my mug, have you? No, don't worry. I hear you. I absolutely do, and I share your sort of sense of anger and rage. It just seems to me to be indefensible that they can be forced to take industrial action and potentially, of course, get penalised. Inflation's about to hit 13%. They've been offered about 3%. They want more. The request is for £2 an hour, but unions go high, employers go low, and usually they meet in the middle, something that Mick Lynch explains very, very well in last week's Full Disclosure podcast. And the bloke that owns the company is worth £272 billion. How did this happen? B, what's it like in these warehouses? But C, I'm pretty sure Sandy and I are right to think that Bezos' personal fortune is relevant to the conversation about these warehouse workers, but I'm not 100% certain. 0345 6060 973. Michelle's in Thurrock. Michelle, what would you like to say?
Oh, hello. Love your programme.
Thank you,
you're
Michelle.
all great.
Oh, lovely.
Listen to you all through
we're not all great. I could tell you stuff, Michelle. It'd make your ears fall off, honestly, but I can't. I'm not allowed to do it on the radio.
Do you know what? You lot got me through the pandemic because I was listening to the radio pretty much all the time and listening to all the updates and everything else.
Thank you.
So, yeah.
Well, you got us. You got us. Knowing you were listening is what got us through the pandemic, as it goes.
Yeah. Well, I used to actually work there. I worked in the one in Tilbury.
Okay.
And I wasn't there very long because it was really hard work, very long hours. It was like going back in time.
Really?
Yeah.
How mad that I just said it sounds quite Victorian and you come on, I didn't know you were next, and you just say it was like going back in time. That's what you mean, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly like that. I mean, they would constantly sort of come up and see how many packages. I was on like the packing line, and they would constantly come up and see how much you'd how much you've done, you know, or you're below your target. And it's just physically impossible to do the amount of work that they wanted you to do.
What happens when you start flagging?
Oh, you get told off.
Really?
They would say you're not doing good enough. You've only done. I think it was something like you had to do 100 items an hour, and sometimes you would get you'd get they call it a tote. It's a box, and inside that tote there would be a lot of items. And if you got things that were in like an A4 envelope, you've probably seen those all the time that come from Amazon, the small envelope.
Yes, I have.
You could do it. You could easily do. I mean, there was one time I think I got up to about 70, and I thought, oh my God, I'm really doing well here.
Right.
But then if you got a few boxes of Persil, because obviously it was during the pandemic, and people were ordering all sorts because they couldn't go out, and the things that people were ordering, so you just couldn't physically pack something like that really quickly. So it was quite mercenary, to be honest. It was all about targets and figures and how much stuff they could get out and how quickly they could get it out and the most they could get out of you.
How long did you last?
2 months.
Right, and that broke you? You just had enough?
Yeah, I ended up with like a repetitive strain injury on my wrist because it was just constant, to the point where just before I finished, I actually had to go to the medical room because I said my wrist is like, I can't feel it. It was so sore,
God, you poor
so painful.
Was it a busy medical room?
No, it was only me.
Was it? Because there's been 178 ambulance call-outs since 2018 for that warehouse alone.
I wouldn't be surprised. It's massive, though, James.
That's a fair point.
I don't know if you've ever seen it.
I haven't.
It is huge. And then you've got a floor upstairs where just the robots are. I mean, they used to, before the pandemic, they used to allow people in to like look round and stuff like that. Obviously, they don't now. But yeah, it's like once you're inside that factory, it's like you're in another world.
And how relevant do you think it is to this conversation that the bloke that owns Amazon is worth £272 billion? Is that
they must have made most of their money during the pandemic because everybody was ordering everything. They
made a shed load. I nearly swore then. That's how interesting this subject is. They made a.
Well, the next thing I was going to say was one of the things that I kept having to pack was toilet rolls.
Yeah, I can imagine a big run on toilet rolls, if you pardon the pun. Are you happier now? Are you all right now? You've got a job? You're in work now?
Yeah, it was basically I was on furlough and I just did it for a little while.
Oh,
so
fair
it's
enough.
nothing to do with what I do. But yeah, I'm not going to say what I do in case anyone's listening.
Don't. Why? Would get a bad reputation in Thurrock for listening to this programme, would you? You get marked. You're a marked woman. Burn her! She listens to O'Brien. That's not allowed in Thurrock. That's lovely to talk.
I just don't know if any of my colleagues are listening, you know what I mean?
Yeah, okay. You're on a break. She's on a break. She's on a break. Give her a chance. It's Michelle, thank you. I'm just checking you're all right, to be honest. I wasn't prying. But there it is. 35 pence an hour. No! You can't have more than 35 pence an hour. There was a moment in that conversation with Michelle that I think will stay with me for the rest of my life. When she said, that's just downstairs. All the robots are upstairs. Oh, it's 11:32. Dominic Ellis is here with your headlines. It is 11:35. That little Rishi Sunak intervention is going absolutely gangbusters on social media. Of course, it won't get picked up as much. Well, it might do because the newspapers have come out for Liz Truss. So very briefly, Conservative politicians can get a bit of a kicking from right-wing newspapers if they're the Conservative politicians that aren't the ones that the owners of the Mail and the Telegraph and the rest of them want to be the next Prime Minister. So Sunak might actually get hauled over the coals for this. It's not a city, is it? I'm just trying to conjure up a defence of Rishi Sunak for you. I know. But it's not a city. Have another listen to this.
I managed to start changing the funding formulas to make sure that areas like this are getting the funding that they deserve. Because we inherited a bunch of formulas from the Labour Party that shoved all the funding into deprived urban areas. Then that needed to be undone. I started the work of undoing that.
So, and there will be poverty in Tunbridge Wells. There will be food banks in Tunbridge Wells. So it's unlikely that the Conservative Party members who were assembled to hear that speech, it's unlikely that they are clamouring for more money to be given to the poorest people in Tunbridge Wells. I think that's probably reasonable. So what was he actually talking about? I don't know. I've got a bit of a gap in the schedule for the final hour, and so that is now a contender. Before that, I'm just fascinated by events in Tilbury. I thought Michelle, our last caller, was sent from heaven. having done 2 months in that warehouse in circumstances that, again, I don't think most people covering this story or indeed listening to this programme can conceive of. A 24-year-old packer said he joined the sit-in protest because he doesn't think he should have to work 6 days in order just to pay rent and live a normal life. He said, for a couple of months, I've been eating just one meal a day to save money. We will continue. Everyone is still motivated to do it. Another said the pay was a joke, given how much her bills had gone up. So your bills have doubled in recent months. Inflation is set to hit 13%, according to the Bank of England. And people working in a enormous warehouse in Essex have asked for a pay rise that helps them keep up with inflation. And they've asked for it from a company owned by a man who's worth $272 billion or pounds. Not much difference in it, is there, these days? I am an alien, recently arrived from a far-off galaxy, or from a galaxy far, far away. I've recently arrived. I've assumed human form. I've been to Tilbury. I've spoken to some people who have downed tools and walked out of their work because their employer won't give them a pay rise that allows them to keep up with inflation. So they're among the poorest paid people in society, and all of their bills, all of their external outgoings, all of their expenditure is set to rise by, say, 10%, and they've been offered a pay rise that's barely 3%. And I have had one text. I never know whether people are yanking my chain or really competing for some award for awfulness, suggesting that they should be grateful for it. So explain to an alien what's happened. Not what's happened, but how this happens. Happens, not happened, how it happens. Shabir is in Edinburgh. Shabir, what would you like to say?
Well, what I'd like to say is it just sounds like the politics of envy, and that that's what it sounds like to me, James. I'm sorry.
The politics of envy. Carry on. No, go on.
It's a case of if I can't have that wealth, no one should. And we have to realise that people like the Jobs of this world, or the Gates, or the Musks, or the Bezoses of this world, they've created these companies from nothing at their own risk. And if they failed, they would have lost everything. And right now, they employ millions of people. Like, say, for instance, Amazon. I'm not sure how many employees they have, but it's well over 1 million worldwide.
Yes. No one's suggesting that he should... he doesn't even need to give up any of his personal wealth, does he? It would just be the annual profits of the company that were diminished by paying people enough money. I don't know if you understand these words, Shabir. I don't know if you understand the words politics of envy, to be honest. But let's focus instead on keep up with inflation. Some of the poorest paid people in the country are asking that their ability to pay their bills stays the same as what it is now, while they are among the poorest paid people in the country, and criticising the fact that...
Is that the fault of the employer, though?
Yes, the wages are entirely...
It's not really...
Is it not? So who should they ask for a pay rise?
No, James, it's not the fault of the employer that inflation is where it is.
So who should they ask for a pay rise then?
Well, the government should subsidise a certain amount, without a doubt. If you pay your employees too much, James, it's quite simple.
Where is the money going to come from for the government to subsidise? Will it come from from taxes?
Is it going to come from the employers?
And if I point out Amazon's tax regime, would that be the politics of envy? Listen, I'm only indulging you because I'm feeling very warm and generous and the weather's outside, because you're obviously a ridiculous person who doesn't really mean what you're saying. $272 billion for one man, while his workforce have been denied a pay rise in excess of 35 pence an hour. I mean...
How much do Amazon employees make per hour in the UK? Do you know?
No, mate, you're just not even pretending to be relevant.
No, I'm not pretending to be relevant. What I'm saying is that if you increase wages too much, you will put a lot of businesses out of business. Yeah. It's simple and straightforward.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Amazon, they'll be finished. They'll be finished by tea time if these warehouse workers get £2 an hour.
I disagree with you what you're saying, but all I'm saying is that if you increase wages, If you keep on increasing wages, you'll put a lot of small employers out of business.
Yeah.
It's as simple and straightforward.
So your response to a question about Amazon is to talk about fictional small employers or theoretical small employers?
It's not. I'm not trying to defend Amazon.
Right.
What I'm trying to say is...
You are, because you just said it was the politics of envy to criticise Amazon. Now, just let me remind you what happened 3 minutes ago. You literally were defending Amazon. You phoned in to criticise people, criticising this specific model, Shabir.
What I'm saying is, what has one man's wealth got to do with his employees?
Well,
he's given them
nothing,
employment.
Nothing, Shabir. And Jeff Bezos' wealth has absolutely nothing to do with Amazon workers. Nothing to do with Amazon workers.
There's not a shortage of employment at the moment.
Do you know what else? If these people aren't... Did you just say... Maybe you just said that. I wasn't really concentrating. Did you just say if these people won't work for this pittance, then there's plenty of people that will?
I didn't say pittance at all.
But you did make that point. If they won't work for this money, then there's plenty of people that will.
I didn't say that at all.
Sorry, what did you say?
There's plenty other employment available.
Right, so if they don't like it, they can sod off then?
Well, there's no shortage of jobs at the moment, is there?
No, so they should go and find another job.
If they know what they're signing up to.
So no one should ever be allowed to ask for a pay rise?
No, what I'm saying is...
So who should be allowed to ask for a pay rise?
No, people should be allowed to ask for a pay rise.
And that's the politics of envy.
No, you're twisting what I'm saying. You know that. But what I'm saying is that there's plenty other employment.
I'm not laughing with you, by the way, just for the complete avoidance of doubt. I'm laughing at you.
When you sign up for an employment contract, you know what you're signing up for.
Yeah, and then inflation comes along, and you expect your employer to accommodate that in some way, or at least to address your changed circumstances. So I'd ask you again, who's allowed to ask for a pay rise in the land of Shabir?
Everybody should be allowed to ask for a pay rise, but every employer has their limits.
And how relevant to that employer's ability to provide a pay rise should the amount of money that employer has be, Shabir, do you think?
Well, that's just between the employer and the employee.
So if the employer is the richest man in the world and the employees are asking for something in excess of 35 pence an hour, then the wealth of the employer is relevant to the pay request.
Well, Jeff Bezos doesn't run Amazon anymore. He's a shareholder in Amazon.
The request... Okay, you carry on. So let's just talk about the $15 a year, 15 billion a year profit then. I mean, is that relevant to whether or not they can afford to provide workers with a pay rise? Or is that politics of envy as well?
Number one priority is to shareholders. Without the shareholders, there would be no employees.
Yeah. Well, that's not true either, is it? There's plenty of companies that don't have shareholders, or that you could have nationalised companies. But the point is this. In your world...
Are you suggesting we should nationalise Amazon? Please tell me
you'll probably live with it. But you're distracting me now. I want to get back to the question of who's allowed to ask for a pay rise.
Everybody's allowed to ask for a pay rise.
And who's allowed to get one? Who's allowed to get one?
Well, if the employer can afford it, they will negotiate one. If they can't afford it, then they won't.
And can Amazon afford it?
Well, that's between them and the employer. Them and the employees, rather.
Yes, I know.
You can't put everything. On the employer's
So it's not the
head.
politics of envy then.
It is, to a certain degree, it is, in the sense that you're pointing out that Jeff Bezos is worth whatever he's worth, several $1 billion, right? Well, so what if he is?
I know. It's irrelevant.
Without him, there would be no million Amazon employees.
Yes.
None of these people would have a job without him.
And they should be grateful for that job, and they should stop complaining about the fact that they have to work six days a week in a warehouse where 178 ambulances have been called out in the last 4 years, because if they don't like it, they should jolly well clear off and get a job somewhere else. I'm perfectly clear about what you've said.
What I'm saying is...
The person who doesn't understand what you've said, Shabir, is you.
You're twisting what I'm saying, James.
I'm not twisting what you say. I'm holding up a mirror, mate. It's not my fault that you don't like what you see.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
But it is perfectly comprehensible. 11:48 is the time. The way my mind works, the more I look at this Rishi Sunak story, and it has absolutely exploded now, as I told you that it would. Labour MPs pointing out it rather suggests that all the talk of levelling up was a complete lie. I don't want you to laugh at me. I'll give you something to laugh at in a minute. Here's something to laugh at. Wow, James, cutting off the last caller because he outsmarted you and you were losing the argument. So there you go. There's something for you to laugh at. I don't want you to laugh at me about this. The way my mind works, I can't believe that this faux pas is as huge as it looks. I think there must be more to this than me. There is no way that Rishi Sunak would stand up in public, in a form of public. It looks like an orchard in Kent, a sort of outdoor hustings for Conservative Party members. I cannot believe that Rishi Sunak would stand up and say, one of the things I tried to do as Chancellor was take money away from deprived urban areas and give it to areas where wealthy Conservative supporters live. I genuinely can't believe he would have done that. So I think something else has gone on here. But maybe I'm doing what I always do, and I'm being too kind and too nice to right-wing people, when in fact they're much, much worse than I portray them to be, as Shabir potentially just proved. David's in Highgate. David, what's going on?
Royal, I can answer two questions at once if you wish.
Wow.
Good morning, James.
Good morning, David.
Okay, because I never knew about the Rishi Sunak one, so I'll answer that very quickly. The analogy is this. In Texas, you have a right-wing governor. If you wanted to unseat him, you would have to be even more right-wing than the governor that is sitting. So you would appeal to the Republican Party and say, I'm more right-wing than he is. Let's relax even more gun controls. And this is how you...
Let me steer you. I'm very grateful for that. But as you said yourself, you'd only just stumbled across the story. It doesn't quite fit the interest I have in it. Let me steer you back to why you rang in and the question of this epic imbalance. And be very careful not to sound envious when you're describing these people in Tilbury. Or their boss, more pertinently, or the owner, the founder of their company.
I'm not envious in that respect.
Yes.
So basically, the system with Amazon and all the other funded companies, which are household names like Boots, is that inequality is built into the system. And it's built in several ways. That if you take over a company, you borrow several times the value of that company. And
but Amazon didn't do that, did they? So again,
they might have done that initially.
No, because he founded it in his garage, I think. I mean, there is a story of epic achievement here. It's just that it doesn't inevitably lead to epic imbalance and inequality, as this appears to.
Yes, I understand. But what goes on is that he wants to expand, and he wants to expand faster than the money that is coming in. Right. So then he has to borrow again. So if he only borrowed $100 to get going to buy his first bit of stock, he has to borrow $2 million to have 50 lines to go to sell all around the world. So it's and then the money does come back in. And for many years, Amazon did make a profit. I don't know if you knew that.
Yeah, I did know.
Or
that,
remember?
Actually.
Yeah. So Amazon didn't make. It's only now that they were actually making real profits, and because
I think. Listen, I'm grateful for the call. I do understand most of what you've said. I think the real answer to the question is that there is an ideology, and whether it is sort of employed by people who benefit from it or people who don't, there is an ideology that says, in order to make as much money as you can for shareholders, you pay as little money as you can get away with to your workers. I think it's that simple, David, isn't it?
It is as simple as that. Yeah. It's not actually spelt out in plain words and say...
Probably is somewhere. I bet it is in Tufton Street. I bet they've got it up in a bloody great tapestry all over the wall.
It's just the way... It's the way that they're taught in the business schools and in the universities.
And when we hear the word regulation, or indeed the word deregulation, that is simply checks and balances put in place to limit that equation. So here is a world in which you pay your staff as little as you can. Ultimately, of course, it leads to slavery. You pay workers as little as you can possibly get away with in order to keep as much of the fruits of their labour as you possibly can. And it is a well-known worldview. You rarely hear people prepared to express it in such stark terms. When they do express it in such stark terms, they normally come a cropper. I'm thinking that Rishi Sunak might have just accidentally come a cropper of similar proportion. But I think it is that simple. I just think that the triumph of the second half of the 20th century, or the triumph of post-1979 politics and media in this country, is to persuade the workers that is somehow the right way of doing things. And that's how you end up with people thinking Jeff Bezos deserves every single thing he's got, and the workers in Tilbury should be grateful for the jobs and the wages that they have. And lots of people do believe that. Lots of people do. Just most of them aren't going to say so in public. Callum's in Murray in Scotland. Callum, what would you like to say?
I've got a very different perspective on this. I work as a
chemical engineer and a nuclear engineer for years across lots of industries.
Oh, yeah.
And the regulations you're talking about, I include all the safety regulations, include all the environmental legislations. So what they are actually doing is they're holding companies accountable for the welfare of the environment and their community and their staff.
Yes.
So it's about holding these people accountable for their actions.
Yes.
I worked for a really large multinational company. In June this year, we did the opposite of Jeff Bezos.
Wow.
We decided that everywhere in the world that anyone worked, because of the extreme impact COVID had on everyone, the performance of the company during that period, all the adaptations people had to make, we actually gave everyone in the world £1,000 one-off payment we know everything's hard right now, we know inflation's hurting,
Why?
we know COVID's impacted families.
Who took the decision ultimately? Who made that decision?
That was the board. That was the board that made that decision. And there's a really clear link between...
Did no one tell them that the most important element of any business is keeping shareholders happy?
The most important part of any business is to be actually a responsible business so you can stay in business for the next year. And this is the point I was coming to. Any single breach of regulation, any single impacting disaster like Union Carbide in Bhopal will kill that company off.
Yeah.
To maintain high levels of safety, environmental compliance, to maintain efficient workforces, you need people that are working as a team for you, not working as slaves below you. And you get higher performance by about 3 times from people that are engaged and actually want to work. You can keep turning people over and burning them out, but eventually you run out of people willing to do those jobs. And those companies will eventually fail.
Do you, though?
You do. You definitely do.
Because you're a very highly qualified worker, and I choose my words carefully. There's a much more finite supply of workers like you than there is of...
No. We paid everyone in Africa working in our factories as operators £1,000 one-off payment. That payment is worth a lot. Everyone in India working for our company got paid.
And this is what it looks like. So we're all groomed, aren't we? In a way, not. I mean, not to the ghoulish degree of some perspectives, but just to think, oh no, you couldn't possibly do that. Even I would think, oh no, you couldn't possibly do that. But you can. So you look at these figures, you look at these numbers: 15 billion profit, 272 billion in the pockets of one man, and somehow they, to sound a little bit shallow for a moment, they have created a world in which almost everybody thinks, well, things could probably be better, but you can't just start giving £1,000 to everybody on the workforce, whereas in fact, of course you can.
Of course you can. And the thing is, it builds a company for tomorrow, and then the shareholders and the institutions will back that company for tomorrow.
This is a company that has zero respect for staff that are working in its warehouses, isn't it? I mean, it may not be, and they're welcome to correct me, but they're not looking to make them feel dignified and valued and supported. They're looking to squeeze as much labour out of them as they possibly can, and if they have to leave the warehouse in an ambulance, then so be it. That's 178 ambulances since 2018.
But James, what happens when someone sets up a business that is Amazon but nice?
Yeah.
What happens to Amazon then? And this is the key point. Amazon has effectively got a monopoly on this sort of business in some ways. But once you get an Amazon that's nice and is respectful to its colleagues, respectful to its partners, because everyone that works for you is a partner, Amazon will die. It will die extremely quickly.
But it won't. You see, this is where...
Well,
has it? Really?
No, it's happened to lots of companies. When you have companies that treat their staff badly, have bad external perspectives, as soon as there is real competition, and that's what we're talking about here,
I hope
Amazon will die on the vine.
I hope you're right, and I envy your optimism. I thought I was quite an optimistic person, but the problem is that most of us, and I'm afraid I'm probably guilty of this, if I'm online and I'm looking to buy a washing line or a lawnmower, I'm going to buy the cheapest one. And if you've just given £1,000 to every employee in your company, then you're unlikely to be flogging the cheapest lawnmower.
No, but why would you do that after the conversation you've just had today? You have to hold yourself.
Because I'm lazy.
You have to hold yourself to a higher standard, James.
It's not me. Even if I did, it wouldn't make much of a difference, would it? I try, but nobody's perfect. The problem is the world you envision depends upon everybody, even people who can't afford to. I hope
James,
you're right.
I disagree. It relies on one person making one change and then everyone rolling down the hill with them. I work in changing the behaviours of large factories. It doesn't work because you change everyone. It works because you change one person.
Yeah.
And that's all you have to do. And Amazon is one of those companies that will fail at some point, or they'll change. There'll be one of two options. And the bonfire regulation is really important to think about, because what it does is it removes accountability from people like Rees-Mogg, from the owners of the companies, from the James Dysons, who can then damage their employees and damage their environment. And that's the key step.
I'm sure that James Dyson would dispute that is his
well, no,
desire.
I shouldn't have said him, but
no.
There's other companies we could mention.
I guess because my analysis was a bit too simplistic. When I said that, we're talking about an economic model in which you pay workers as little as you can possibly can, in order to keep as much money as you possibly can for yourself and your shareholders. Also, of course, you squeeze as much out of those workers who you are paying as little as you possibly can. And you often do that by seeking a removal of regulations that limit how much money they can make for you that day. And they will often be health and safety legislation. They will often be health and safety regulations. So, or the things that protect consumers. If you're going to talk about rules covering things like cladding on the side of buildings, why would you want red tape when it comes to what cladding you can stick on the side of the building? Well, you know the answer to that, and it's got two words in it. 12 noon is the time. It's 3 minutes after 12. I've enjoyed them today, so I'll read them out. I presume you get a thrill out of me reading them out, so in order to make sure that they keep coming in, I will read them out. Here's a good one. Please ask O'Brien on air if he has ever bought anything through Amazon, viewed a programme made by Amazon, or watched on Prime. Has ever purchased anything through any of Mr. Bezos' hundreds of companies, or is friends with anybody who ever has? The answer is yes, I assure you. Mr. O'Brien, you are the worst kind of hypocrite. You are a smug hypocrite. Is that the worst kind of hypocrite? What about a murderous hypocrite? Surely a murderous hypocrite would be worse than a smug hypocrite. But anyway, you are a smug hypocrite. If you are not part of the solution, you are part of the problem. What a shame your producer and yourself don't have the intelligence or gumption to read this out. Well, we can all agree about the last bit. The problem I've got, of course, with our genius friend here is that I think all companies where shareholders draw enormous sums of money out of the pot while the workforce is paid a relative pittance, I think all those companies should give their workers a pay rise. So in order to avoid being a smug hypocrite, I'm not ever going to be able to buy anything again, or I'm going to have to spend my life and increasing my carbon footprint by seeking out the relatively small number. And where can I buy my sausages, for example, if I am to avoid being a smug hypocrite? Because somewhere in the production line of those sausages will be somebody who I believe deserves a pay rise. This could be, I'm going to have to start coming to work naked on a pogo stick. And it'll have to be an environmentally sourced pogo stick that has not at any point involved a workforce who I think are paid too little in relation to the dividends drawn out by shareholders. In order to avoid being a smug hypocrite on Monday morning, I advise you to avoid the A4 at all costs, because I will be bouncing around naked on a pogo stick in order to get to work. Obviously, I'll probably conk out at about 10:30 in the morning because I won't have eaten anything since the last thing I ate, whatever that was, in order to avoid being a smug hypocrite by availing myself of services and companies that I disapprove of in some way, shape or form. I don't think I can do my job either, because I think I deserve a pay rise. So that's the end of today's show. How long can I stay silent for before the emergency tape kicks in? 20 seconds, yeah? That's today's show. All done. Please keep texts coming like that. I appreciate it. Probably involves an enormous effort of will to type them unaided, but please keep them coming. It is 6 minutes after 12. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Speaking of idiots, here's the Daily Mail today. Not feeling quite so sanctimonious now, are we, Captain Casheroony Snooze Fest? Is that an actual headline in the best-selling newspaper in the country, or is it something written on a toilet wall by an imbecilic 12-year-old? Yeah, it is a headline. This is about Keir Starmer's multiple breach of the ministerial code, and it's a very powerful story. In fact, it's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It's got 11 paragraphs, this story. It's so big, it's so important. Page 6 of the Daily Mail. Keir Starmer, 8 breaches. This is the same newspaper that told you not to worry about the fact that the bloke who presided over just around about 200,000 COVID deaths was having parties while the rest of us couldn't even visit our mum or go to funerals. That's not a big deal. And then dedicated 2 weeks of front pages to trying to get him into trouble for having a beer while working in a constituency office in Durham, which left them with egg all over their face. And now they're trying to tell you that... Guess what appears in the final paragraph of this story? Miss Stone, that's the parliamentary commissioner, Miss Stone noted that the breaches were minor and or inadvertent and that there was no deliberate attempt to mislead. That doesn't matter. I don't care if the person that conducted the actual investigation described it as minor and inadvertent with no deliberate attempt to mislead. Keir Starmer is clearly a wrong-un and a fraudster, and he should never be allowed to criticise Boris Johnson, the serial liar and lawbreaker, ever again. That is how screwed our media is. The best-selling newspaper in the country can print a story designed to castigate Keir Starmer, despite the fact that the story is about an investigation in which the investigator concluded that although rules had indeed been broken, all the breaches were minor and or inadvertent, and there was no deliberate attempt to mislead. I'm joined now by the political editor of the Daily Bugle to tell me why this is actually an enormously important story that you are going to be too stupid to realise doesn't really matter a jot. And don't think it's a right-wing news. The far left lot are going to get more excited about this than everybody else because they continue, of course, to be determined to prove George Orwell's old diktat that the right wing spends its time searching for recruits to sign up, while the left wing spends its time looking for traitors to expel. So that's the end of today's Idiot Corner. We haven't actually had a Woke Watch today. Is there anything in Woke? Can we check the Woke Watch archives? You may be able to tell by the slightly unfocused nature of the last 6 or 7 minutes of this programme that I'm yet to decide what we're going to talk about next. This is something you should do before the light. Right, Radio 1, gather round, students. This is something you should do before. I mean, ideally, before the programme starts. That would be good. That's what the proper presenters do. The grown-ups, they know what they're going to be talking. They can tell you. They can come on air at 10 o'clock in the morning and tell you what they're going to be doing at 12 o'clock. And if you can't do that, the least you could do is know what you're going to be talking about at 10 past 12 at 12, so that when the little red light comes on in the studio, you know what you're going to be talking to people about. But I don't. And I can't risk another silence. It's not cumulative, is it? It's not. I can start again. So I could do 19 seconds of silence and then just go, and then another 19. Just if it hits 20, you get the emergency tape. What is the emergency tape these days? Is it still Steve Allen? Is it? Yeah. It's tempting. I'm going to talk about Rishi Sunak. And as I speak, it popped up on my television screen, which means, and it's the New Statesman who got, no, it's not the New Statesman. Is it the New Statesman? Rachel Wearmouth, who it is the New Statesman. They got hold of some footage, but I hesitate to call it a leak because if the contender in the Tory leadership campaign is standing up in a field in Tunbridge Wells delivering a speech, it's not like he's in a locked box. It's not like he's hiding in a fridge like that other fella used to do. But the deputy political editor of the New Statesman has got this story. I'll play you the clip again. I'll play the long version, then I've got a short version to punctuate proceedings. And then I'll bore you rigid with my pontifications on it.
I managed to start changing the funding formulas to make sure that areas like this are getting the funding that they deserve. Because we inherited a bunch of formulas from the Labour Party that shoved all the funding into deprived urban areas. Then that needed to be undone. I started the work of undoing that.
I mean, he doesn't actually sneer when he says deprived urban areas, but he might as well. It reminds me ever so slightly of that unfortunate interview he gave as a young man. I don't know whether you've heard this yet.
I have friends who are aristocrats. I have friends who are upper class. I have friends who are, working class, but I'm not working class.
Is it me, or does the voice sound a bit the same? When he says deprived urban areas, does it have a similar timbre to when he goes, not working class? Have a listen again to have we got the short version of the first bit? We've got a 6 second. Oh, it's only 6 seconds. Sorry, I've lost the ability to count. So have a listen again. Listen out for the bit where he says deprived urban areas. And then in the second bit, the bit where he talks about working class, not working class. I think his voice does something similar. I'm probably imagining it, but hey ho, I've got an hour to fill.
I managed to start changing the funding formulas to make sure that areas like this are getting the funding that they deserve. Because we inherited a bunch of formulas from the Labour Party that shoved all the funding into deprived urban areas, then that needed to be undone. I started the work of undoing that.
And then this.
I have friends who are aristocrats, I have friends who are upper class, I have friends who are, working class, but I'm not working class.
No, working class. I don't know. I mean, what's going on? Okay, genuinely, you seem to have a contender for the leadership of the Conservative Party and a former Chancellor of the Exchequer acknowledging that Labour has redistributed wealth to deprived areas, presuming that everybody present, and remember, these will be members of the Tunbridge Wells Conservative Association, I think, probably by definition. He's presuming that everyone present will share his view that this was a bad thing. So the Treasury has a finite amount of money to distribute, right? And the Labour Party created a model in which that money would be distributed to the poorest part. Some of that money, more of that money, would be distributed to the poorest parts of the country. Rishi Sunak is not only condemning the idea that public money should go to the poorest members of the public, he's presuming that everybody present in a sunny meadow in Tunbridge Wells, members presumably, because it's only Conservative members that get a vote in this leadership election, he's going to presume that they're all agreeing with him. Is there any other way to read this story? Stella Creasy is a Labour MP. She writes, child poverty in the deprived urban area I represent is twice as high as it is in the area Rishi Sunak is boasting about channeling funds to for votes in the Tory party leadership contest. When people reveal their true selves and principles to you, believe them. Anna Turley, former MP for Redcar. So refreshing to hear the first bit of honesty in this leadership election. Yes, we stopped funding going to those areas most in need to shovel it into the Tory shires. Tracy Braidman, who's now the Labour and Cooperative Mayor of West Yorkshire, former MP in Kim Leadbeater's constituency. Utterly shameless admission that all the talk of levelling up was a lie. I really hope Northern Tory MPs stand up to this. I mean, like, hand on heart, John Trickett MP, the Conservative Party has taken off its mask. When they think no one is looking, they admit that levelling up was a lie. Now, I'm going to take issue with this. I'm probably going to make a right idiot of myself. I just don't buy the idea that this is like a Scooby-Doo moment. I don't believe that Rishi Sunak would have said this out loud if he was actually saying what everyone is accusing him of saying. Do you see what I mean? He's been taken by surprise by the existence of a camera phone? Surely not. And it's quite good quality footage. It looks to me like it's on a tripod, doesn't it? It's not wobbly or anything like that. There's a camera there. He knows there's a camera there. Do you see what I mean? So listen, I'm all for absolute pylons when it comes to politicians who appear to have committed an appalling faux pas. And my goodness me, Rishi Sunak is at the heart of a massive pylon now. I want you to tell me, do you really think, and I know maybe I'm sounding very naive, do you really think that Rishi Sunak, and I'm going to play the tape again and again and again, I imagine, during the course of the next 45 minutes, except for the bit when I'm playing you the tape of Brian Cox on this week's Full Disclosure, because it is brilliant. He is brilliant, rather. Is it plausible that a politician as slick as Rishi Sunak would have said in the presence of a camera that they were going to take money away from deprived urban areas and give it instead to the home counties, to the areas where well-heeled Conservative members live? 0345 6060 973. Leaving aside, of course, for the moment, the fact that they've been in for 12 years. It's 12 years since the Labour Party had any say at all in where money got spent or what the Treasury did. But I can't quite believe it. I don't know why. Maybe it's my natural good nature. Maybe it's my natural naivety. But I can't believe he's done what he seems to have done. And this is one of the oddest phone-in questions that I've ever framed, I think. And goodness knows there's a lot of competition. Has Rishi Sunak actually done what he seems to have done? 0345 6060 973. And of course, we can't confine proceedings entirely to that question for the next 45 minutes. So what do you make of this clip? What do you make of these comments by Rishi Sunak? 0345 6060 973. Because I believe that a lot of them believe this. I am capable of believing that Rishi Sunak is one of the people that believe this. We shouldn't be putting money into deprived urban areas when we could instead be giving it to Tunbridge Wells. But I can't believe he would be stupid enough to say it out loud, which makes me think something else is happening here from what appearances suggest. It's 12:17. Your calls after this. It is 20 minutes after 12. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. What's going on then? Rishi Sunak has appeared to tell Conservative members in Tunbridge Wells that he was, as Chancellor, dedicated to removing funding going to deprived urban areas and redirecting it instead to places like Tunbridge Wells, which will have problems. It will have food banks and what have you, but I don't think that would be the Tunbridge Wells that Conservative members were keen to see improved. I could be. What's going on? David's in Nottingham. David, what do you reckon?
Well, that's exactly what he said.
Yeah, but he must have meant something else.
I don't think he did. What he said was the Labour government did a calculation as to where they're going to put funding.
Yeah.
And the Labour government decided, let's put it in deprived urban areas.
Yeah.
Now he's saying after 12 years of Tory rule, we don't need to do that. That's obviously not working. Let's put it in richer areas.
He's not saying the second bit. He's not saying that's obviously not working.
All right. Well, maybe he's not saying that exactly, but that is what he means by it.
I actually do disagree with you there.
Right?
Well, yeah, no, I get that bit, but I don't think he's saying we don't need to give it there anymore. He's just saying screw him, isn't he? That's the accusation. Let's check the tape. Stay there. Let's check the tape.
I managed to start changing the funding formulas to make sure that areas like this are getting the funding that they deserve. Because we inherited a bunch of formulas from the Labour Party that shoved all the funding into deprived urban areas, then that needed to be undone. I started the work of undoing that.
Yeah, he's not saying we had to stop doing it because it hadn't worked. He's saying we had to stop doing it because they were getting it.
Or, well, maybe, you could see it as maybe the bottom level is too low. So,
yes.
So if you're thinking, right, we can leave the amount of funding for deprived urban areas as it is, but the lower level that the places like Tunbridge Wells gets is too low. Let's raise that. If that's it, then not.
But these funds will be specifically for addressing issues of poverty, won't they? It's not. I mean, they're specific. The New Statesman has done research into one of them. It spent £1 billion. 90% of it went to Conservative constituencies anyway.
I'm very, very surprised about that.
You say sarcastically.
Of course.
I'm on the radio. I can't see your face, David. Can I? I can't see your cheeky grin when you say it. You sounded a bit like Ian Hislop when you said that. So that's the only reason I knew you were being sarcastic. And he does that voice on Have I Got News for You? I think it's... I mean, Julian Suffolk says poorer areas clearly don't deserve what Tunbridge Wells does. His own words. You better believe it, James. I actually replied yes to my radio when you asked whether you were being naive about him wanting to move funds from those in need with his foot stamping harder on the necks of the working class. James, you are being naive. Sunak is a desperate man. He's also used to negative stuff by Tories. I must read these a bit quicker. This is so many coming in now. So Sunak is actually saying that the previous chancellors for nearly 8 years were also wrong to fund the poorest deprived areas too. Listen, I like this question, and it's a bit personal, but it's my show. I can indulge myself once in a while. Is he really saying what he seems to be saying? That's the best question in the history of phone-ins, isn't it? Listen to it again, and then tell me, is he really saying what he seems to be saying?
I managed to start changing the funding formulas to make sure that areas like this are getting the funding that they deserve. Because we inherited a bunch of formulas from the Labour Party that shoved all the funding into deprived urban areas, then that needed to be undone. I started the work of undoing that.
Is he really saying what he seems to be saying? Steve in Nottingham. Two Nottingham callers. There we go. From Dave to Steve. Steve, what do you reckon?
Yeah, absolutely, James. He's saying exactly.
But the camera, it's not an invisible camera. It's a really good quality shot. I mean, even if it's on a phone, it's on a tripod. So He must have known that it was going to come out or something. Or no?
Well, in that case, I mean, maybe it's so he knows the red meat that he's throwing is out there. I think it's purely that, isn't it? It's red meat to his voters and his sort of constituency. And I think they've been doing it a long time, this funneling of kind of local government money to conservative, councils and, local government establishments. I'm surprised it's only sort of coming out now. I'm surprised he's being that barefaced about it at this point in time. But obviously he's standing for, leadership of the Tory party, and that's why he's doing it. But yeah, it's absolutely barefaced. It's naked.
There's no other analysis of this. There's no other analysis that he's essentially saying we need to take money from the have-nots to give more to wealthy places.
Yeah, he's saying it gleefully as well. I hate the language.
No, he is saying it gleefully. Yeah.
Yeah, you can absolutely tell. So maybe we should be grateful that he's revealed himself like that. But I mean, to be honest, I think it's been fairly obvious for quite a long time that that's what they've been doing since 2010. Yeah,
I mean, I'm not even going to argue with that, but they're not quite as blatant about it, and I just, do you know what? I think I can't believe he's that. I can't believe anyone's that awful, even though I get texts off them every day and the occasional call.
The Conservatives have lurched to the right, James, because they've taken on UKIP. I mean, it's a simple. Yeah,
but UKIP's about hating foreigners. UKIP was full of people who couldn't, who weren't wealthy. The kind of UKIP are the kind of people who would make themselves go hungry in order to hurt a Frenchman.
Well, in regard to this election, that's absolutely another question as to whether the Tories will elect a brown-skinned person or not. No,
I don't. That kind of Tory. I think they'd elect someone who's part of the current cabinet, telling them, commissioning reports saying that racism doesn't exist and we need to get rid of diversity training. They're quite happy to elect a brown-skinned person who insists that brown-skinned people don't need any help because they're not oppressed at all. I mean, they're all making a good fist of that. And Sunak, to be fair, hasn't joined in that particular party alongside Suella Braverman and Kemi Badenoch, but he did make a joke about his own skin colour and suntans at one of the hustings the other day, which a lot of people of colour felt was very unfortunate. I guess I just can't believe it. I can't believe he said it out loud. So I am asking you whether or not he is really saying what he seems to be saying. Let me see if I can find any defences. Here's one. Matthew. I'm no Sunak fan, but it seems he was saying all the funding was going to urban areas. So maybe he's saying that undoing all of the funding going to urban areas, spreading it out a bit more. I am truly trying to be objective. And here's another one. Hi, James. Stop splitting hairs about everything. I thought Rishi Sunak did really well last night. He was so much more constructive. I don't think this is from last night, mate. I don't want to split hairs, but last night's Sky News thing wasn't conducted in a field in Kent, was it? It was I didn't see it. It was conducted in a studio in Isleworth, I imagine. Yeah, I'm probably splitting hairs again, aren't I? He has more facts and figures at his fingertips, and he did get us through furlough. I think he will be the best man for the job. Well, he's the only man applying for the job, to be honest with you. So that means he's come first in a race containing one person. But no, we're not. I'm not splitting hairs. We're not talking about what happened last night. I thought Kay Burley was very effective when she read out a list of all the things that Liz Truss had changed her mind. In fact, we should give Kay a little bit of credit. Should we play that out a little bit where she listed all the... Well, I'll let you, and then sort of did a little Eminem-style question at the end of it. Jonathan Pye, the genius that is Jonathan Pye, or rather the man behind Jonathan Pye is a genius. I can't get enough of this. He's like a reverse Robin Hood, taking from the have-nots to give the wealthy more places to sit outside Pret-a-Manger. It doesn't surprise me. It's just fantastic that he's come out and said it. Has he really come out and said it? John's in Peterborough. John, what do you reckon?
Hi, James. I don't think he has come out and said that. I'm not a fan of Rishi Sunak or any of the current Conservative crop, but I've got a slightly different perspective on this.
Good.
So I was
there must be one. I think there must be a different perspective.
I was a school governor for 8 years in Huntingdon.
Yes.
Which is a Conservative area, and that was between 2005 and 2013. So it was during this sort of Labour period.
Yes.
And we were always told as governors that our schools had lower funding because we were seen as more affluent areas than other places, which is fine because obviously those schools in less affluent areas have got to
have got more pupils with more needs and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
The problem comes that you've still got to run the school. So we had, for instance, in the time I was there, we had a major problem. We needed to replace all the heating system.
Right.
And there just was nowhere near enough funding for that. And there's no way you could get it because your funding formula just said, well, you won't need it. You're a more affluent area. But you still had to, as a governor, you're still tasked, if you like, to keep the school up to scratch and so on and so forth. So I think that's what he's saying, because he's only talking to a group of people in the Conservative area. I think they might understand that there are certain things that you need to do. That if you haven't got enough funding, you just haven't got enough funding. And I think that's what he's tried to get across, but in a really sort of clumsy
And is that a
way,
fair? That's a fair point then.
Well, I think it's a fair point because the problem we had, as I say, is
you've got a school and it needs a new heating system, and there's no money to provide it because school improvement funds are being directed into deprived urban areas. I mean, this bit of research the New Statesman have just done showing that 90% of one of these funds went into conservative areas. It doesn't mean they're poor or wealthy. You can have a school. Do you see what I mean? It might be there's going to be very, very poor parts of conservative constituencies.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I mean, and what I'm saying is, I think it was really clumsy the way he said it, and I think it was a very bad idea to say that. But I think that's what his audience there, given that they were specifically conservative councillors and stuff like that, from that local area, would understand that in those sort of that 2005, 2010 years, some of those areas really struggled to do the basics because they were seen as less needy. And I think that's what he was saying.
I do too, actually. I mean, my motivation.
I'm not a fan. I mean, I am or have been a conservative voter up to the point that Johnson came in, and I agree with the sort of the fundamentals of conservatism, but I don't, and I mean, listen, I'm sure there are lots of people, particularly in this current crop, that would be delighted to know that less money is going to where it's really needed and more money is going.
I don't think that. I think you've provided precisely the analysis that I needed, because and my motivation here is to think, even if he thought that privately, and even if he thought he was in front of an audience of people that agreed with him, he wouldn't say it so explicitly and so boldly in those terms, because obviously, he's not Nadine Dorries, is he? It's 12:32. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Tim Humphrey is here with the headlines. It is 12:35, and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I've got something a bit different coming up for you after 12:45. You'll be aware, because I spoke about it a lot, that I lost a very good friend during lockdown. Not to COVID, but he was only 50. He was taken from us far too young, and I remain bereft at the loss. And you helped me make sure that Father Christmas could visit the home that he left behind after some supply issues threatened to spoil Christmas for his sons, and I will remain eternally grateful to all of you, particularly James McVeigh of the Vamps, who really stepped up to the plate that day to help us get the help that Father Christmas needed to find the house. But we've set up a charity in his memory, and our first sort of results have come through, and I shall be sharing them with you a little later in the programme. Before that, we'll return to the question of whether Rishi Sunak has done what he seems to have done. And before that, I want to, as promised, give you a fairly big chunk of the interview I've done with Professor Brian Cox for this week's Full Disclosure, because I just loved it. I really did. It was one of those interviews where you begin worried. You might not believe this, because I can sometimes come across as a bit pleased with myself. But I approached a lot of these interviews a little bit worried about not being up to the job or being a bit stupid. And I did come away from the interview with Professor Brian Cox feeling a bit stupid. I keep saying Professor in case you think it's the bloke in Succession. That's all. I'm not being silly. But I also want to interview him. So I think that would be the first Full Disclosure where we've interviewed two people with the same name. But this is the physicist and astronomist. Anyway, why am I banging on about it? I've got an hour of it, which you can just go and listen to, and here's a little 5-minute taste. You were irresistibly drawn to the subjects you weren't necessarily the best at school, because you weren't drawn to the subjects where you could bluff your way to an A like you can in history or in English, and you weren't drawn to the subjects that encouraged the admission of not knowing stuff. You were drawn to the subjects that had an actual destination, a subject where you could sit back, even if it took 7 years, and say, I've done it.
Yeah, I mean, I know a lot of history academics who would be very offended by what you just said, but for a good reason.
Would they, though? Because there'd be another history academic over there who completely challenges their analysis of why, Charlemagne...
I think you need all of these disciplines, right?
Yeah.
They're necessary, but not sufficient to understand the human condition, understand our place in the universe, run a peaceful world. You need them all.
Yeah,
you need it, obviously.
Imagination as well as knowledge.
And again, it goes back to hubris, right? It's the idea that, you say, well, I've got a PhD in history, therefore I know how to run a country. Or I've got a PhD in physics, therefore I know how to run a country. The truth of the matter is that all these human pursuits, the arts, humanities, sciences, music, theology, philosophy, all of them are attempts to understand what it means to be human and live these finite, fragile lives that we have. And also they're attempts to get along.
Yeah.
Right? Ultimately, that's what politics is.
Yeah.
That's why I think politics, we could talk about politics, that's why I think we have a problem at the moment, because it's become so adversarial. And that I think we've forgotten what we're supposed to be doing. We're not supposed to be winning the argument, actually. We're not supposed to be putting forward a vision of society and winning as much as making sure that this wide mixture of opinion that you naturally have in a country of 60, 70, 80 million people is accommodated. It goes back to that idea that you've got to understand that you're not right.
Yeah.
It's not your vision of the way to run a country is not necessarily or even possibly the right one, because there are lots of different views.
I don't know whether this will surprise you or not, but last week's guest was Mick Lynch of the RMT, who actually espoused some quite similar thoughts sitting in that chair about the the myth of the ultimate victory, as it were, and it is about achieving some of what you want while accommodating some stuff that you don't want, and that's what getting along is, really.
Yeah. Oppenheimer, in his Reith lectures, this is the transferable skills thing. You talked about quantum mechanics, so it'll take me a minute to but there's an analogy. So he said, imagine, you think about an electron, and it's like sometimes a single particle. You have to think of it as a point-like object, a grain of sand, which is probably how most of us would think about a little particle. But actually, also, we understand we have to think about it in some cases as an extended wavy thing that fills the space that it's in. So you've got these two things that look contradictory: a point-like object, extended wavy thing. The truth is that it's neither of those. It's a very complex kind of behavior that this thing has, and these are two good analogies to try and think about it, and they're applicable in different circumstances. So they look like ideas that are completely at right angles to each other, that you have to mutually contradictory, but you have to hold them both in your head. You have to have a skill, which is hold them in your head, and nature forces you to hold those two things in your head simultaneously in order to get a full picture of the system, or a better picture of the physical system. And of course, you know what I'm going to say, Oppenheimer said, and so it is with politics.
Wow.
You've got to understand that human beings have individual needs, and they have individual, that they go to work and they want to keep as much of their money as they can, or whatever it is. They have an individual life. But also human beings have a social life, a community exists.
Sure.
And all human beings understand that they have to compromise and work together. It's not even compromise, is it? Just work together.
Community.
And so they look like they're pulling in different directions. Oppenheimer says you could call them capitalism and communism, right? Because he was talking in the 50s, sure. Right? So, and McCarthy was pursuing him at the time. Yeah. So communism on one side, capitalism on the other side. But of course, neither's the right way to do it, because it's complicated. It's like an electron. Wow. And that's what his Reith lecture
That's
is.
Genius.
And you go, yeah, well, he was a genius. And you go, yes, that's true. So if PPES, if you gave that lecture to all the people who are in our government now and said, as part here, let's just try and understand a bit of quantum mechanics, and then you can understand that idea, and now we'll move that idea over to politics because it's applicable. And that's what Oppenheimer was doing.
Blimey. It is 12:42. Blimey. I sound like a false show character. It's amazing. It's brilliant. And it is. And he touches on this at the end of his current tour as well, at the current show that he's doing. It's at the Royal Opera House, I think, tonight and tomorrow, and then he hits the road again at the end of the month. And he touches on it towards the end of this about what politics could learn from physics and the work of Richard Feynman. Anyway, you can tell. I mean, I was already an admirer of Professor Brian Cox. I'm now a complete fanboy, for which I make no apology. I do probably owe you an apology, however, for having quite warm words to say about Rishi Sunak back in the day. But the budget he brought out at the beginning of lockdown was, I mean, a very good piece of work. I know it left lots of people out, and that was awful. But the idea of using public money to protect the public is something that you might have, I think, naively hoped the Conservatives might learn from. Of course, they didn't. They saw it very much as a self-contained necessary action. But I said nice things about him back then. I won't be saying many nice things about him again. But did he say what we think he said in this orchard in Tunbridge Wells yesterday, or indeed earlier today? 12:43 is the time. Kirsty's in Greenock. Kirsty, what would you like to say?
Hi, I'm in Geographic, but it's all right. It's the next town.
All right, my apologies. Heads will roll. Did he say what we think he said?
Yes. I actually thought about it, and I've actually been wanting to phone you on all different things, and hopefully this time I have spoke to you before.
Yes.
And you were very nice, but I accidentally said a word I wasn't supposed to say.
Well, don't do that again.
So I don't want to do that again.
No, don't. Whatever you do. There was an Irish fellow on the other day who used a swear word, and then another, because we were talking about Northern Ireland, and I had to dump it. I've got a button I can press. Did I do that to you?
Yes, you did.
Good,
but
right.
you apologised. You were very nice about it.
Well, I am a very nice person.
Yeah, but I was on a night shift and I'd just come back. So
I remember that.
You remember that. I'm a nurse, yeah?
You're a nurse. I do remember that. And that was fine, and I wasn't cross or anything. But the worst one, it was the same week. Two Irish fellas rang in, and it sounds like the beginning of a joke, this, doesn't it? Two Irish fellas. The first one swore, so I had to press dump. But if you were on hold waiting to talk to me, you'd hear what the caller said. Because you're getting the absolute live bit, not the slightly delayed bit that lets us dump people who swear.
Oh, yeah.
So we dumped the first fella for using a swear word, and the next fella came on and he goes, James, that was funny, wasn't it? That fella who said... And then he said the word again that the last fella had said that got dumped. And the great tragedy of this, Kirsty, was that I couldn't share the joke with any, because I was the only one that could hear it, because we had to dump him too. But anyway, where were we?
Sake, that's good. Anyway, what I was trying to say is that... I do believe that there's that, like from the caller you had previously on the other subject about they thinking it's fine for people to be super rich and pay people peanuts. It's this mindset. And what I really find appalling about the whole thing is that he's talking to a group of people that are probably, maybe I'm a bit naive, but I personally think there's a lot of people, rich Conservative voters, that spend their time when they're having to pay tax, pay different people so that they pay the minimum of tax that they can, or some don't even pay tax. They find all the loopholes they can, but at that same time, these same people want the tax revenue.
I see what you mean. Yeah, so they also want the. Yeah, I do. Well, I don't know. I think quite often the sort of shenanigans you describe are confined to really, really wealthy people, particularly since IR35 was brought in and the sort of self-employment benefits that some people enjoyed have gone.
He is one of those people. I mean,
Rishi Sunak is.
His wife is one of those people that avoided paying tax.
Yes.
And here he is, a man in charge. And let's be honest.
Avoided paying tax while living in the United Kingdom. We have to make that clear.
Living in the United Kingdom. All I'm saying is that what is I think is ironic and what I think is appalling is that there is a lot of people that they spend their time not wanting to pay tax, but still expect your NHS to be in perfect order for them, that still expect their area to have all the tax revenue. But when it comes to a poor area, they don't give a damn. And this is what I'm saying is appalling, is that there's people out there that are in it for themselves. It's just about the individual, which Thatcher,
it's more than that
I'm sorry to tell you, brought out.
No, I know, but it's also about portraying everybody else as being undeserving. It's about the fact that these people, and that's why the use of the word urban, I'm sure, was demographic and geographic rather than designed to conjure up the use of the word urban in music. Hang on, I'm very short of time, so I better shut up, Kirsty, and you carry on.
Okay, so what I just want to say is the other thing is I feel that we're living a bit, I don't know if you remember history, the French Revolution and why people actually revolted. Because the super rich weren't paying, and it was only your peasants that were paying taxes. And even the king asked the nobility, "You must start paying the taxes," and they didn't want to pay the taxes. And I feel that's where we're living in. We're living in a situation where the people without power, the ordinary man in the street, me, you, whatever, are the people that don't have power. There's a book actually, it was a Scottish thing about independence, but it's about the people, like when Scotland and Union, and when the people who would run out their homes, like the Highland clearances and all that, the poor had no lawyers. They had no power. Yeah. And this is where I feel
you've knitted together the last 2 hours of the programme here, really, haven't you? About the imbalances.
Yes, it's the imbalance. And you were talking, you also mentioned about Sweden and all the Nordic countries.
I did.
They do pay high taxes, but
they have much better public services.
They don't have this obscenity of
the gap. I did say a lot of this, Kirsty. I know. I mean, I did say that the gap between the top and the bottom in the Nordic countries was nowhere near as big. You haven't just come off a night shift now, have you?
No, sorry.
I can tell you've got about 10 times more energy than you did. No, you're on holiday. I can tell you've got about 10 times more energy than you had last time you rang, and you were dead on your feet last time, effing and jeffing all over the place.
I didn't. Did I say that?
No. It was the S word. It was the S word.
Because
I think
you couldn't. Well, all right. Well, I couldn't remember, but I was so angry with the Tories anyway, as I usually am. Right, but all I'm saying is, there's that mindset, and what is sad is what I do not understand is the people down south who are poor,
yes,
and who actually vote for the Conservatives. I do understand.
I understand them. I can sing it to you if you want.
Okay, sing it to me. What is it? Tell me.
The rich man in his castle, the poor man at his gate. God made them high and lowly and ordered their estates. They think that's how it's meant to be. They honestly think that that's their role in life. Doff cap, tug forelock. Vote Rees-Mogg. 12:52 is the time. That podcast with Professor Brian Cox is available wherever you get your podcast, but obviously the Global Player app is where I get mine. Now, as promised, something a little bit different to end our time together this week. You'll be aware probably that I lost one of my closest friends during lockdown, and we set up a charity in his memory. It's called the Andy Taylor Foundation, and we have just sort of achieved our first milestone with the young people that the charity has been set up to help find ways into digital media in particular. And it's young people who don't have the kind of benefits that people like me had. They don't have family in the industry or the connections and the contacts to get ahead, and it is one of those sectors where that kind of thing can really help. So that's what we set up the charity to do, the Andy Taylor Foundation. Andy's widow Lara joins me now with one of the first cohort of graduates from the Andy Taylor Foundation to sort of celebrate this milestone. I'll begin with Lara, and then I'll speak to you, Divine, because you've just completed the first short course that we've managed to fund. And Laura, just a few more words, if you would, about what specifically the charity is designed to do.
Thanks, James. You summed it up really well, of course. But Andy, my late husband, was a small bloke from Rochdale with a big heart and big ideas. And he took a path through life that he never really expected. He didn't necessarily expect to leave Rochdale, and he certainly didn't expect to end up starting his own media company in London. But as he progressed through his career, he realised that so many of the people he knew from school and home could have done what half the people he was meeting were doing. They just needed a break. They just needed a chance. They needed an in. So as he sadly couldn't carry on that work, as he got a brain tumour, he tasked me, you, and various industry professionals and friends with doing it for him. So our first programme is running in Greater Manchester. It's the Foot in the Door programme 2022. We hope and expect that it will be the start of a long-lasting impact. And we chose to take a relatively small number of people and hopefully make a relatively big impact on their lives. So they've just finished a highly intensive 12-week program of on-site life and technical training, and then work placements with some really fantastic, really great industry teams.
Perfect. And Divine Vika, you are one of the first people to benefit from this scheme. Give me an idea of what you've been doing and how much this means to you.
Oh, we've been doing a lot of great stuff. We've been able to dibble and dabble in different activities and different experiences. One of my favorite things that we've gotten to do during our course has been the ideas generation sessions. Those have been really helpful to me, as well as the other people on the course. This opportunity honestly means the world. I'm extremely appreciative because I've been able to find people who truly believe in my talent, who truly believe in my vision, and they've been nothing short of amazing. And I'm so appreciative of every single one of them, as well as the people that I've met here.
You've done 6 weeks, I think, in the digital news team at Lad Bible, based in Manchester. We're coming off the back of the Sharp Futures, our friend at the Sharp Futures charity, their boot camp. You're coming off the back of that now. And it's involved masterclasses from industry professionals and the company that Andy founded, Little Dot, pitching a sports story to them. Are you, genuinely getting the idea that you're accruing skills that are going to make you employable when you get to the end of the process?
Oh, most definitely, most definitely. I think one of the benefits of being on this course that I have found has been having industry professionals coming in, talking to us, helping us to shape our skills, giving us knowledge of things that we didn't know before. And they've really given us the confidence to be able to go out there in the big world and have a chance at something that we maybe couldn't have gotten the opportunity to do maybe a year ago.
Tell me a bit about some of the other members of your cohort, if you can. What sort of people? Because I know what Andy wanted us to achieve. I'm just trying to confirm that we've actually got close to achieving what he wanted us to achieve.
I must say you have hit the nail on the head with everyone that has taken part on this course. So we've got Ala. Ala is a smart, witty individual. She's very much into script writing, and that's where she wants to go into. And she has definitely learned a lot. We've had an industry professional who is into script writing that has definitely helped her to perfect her skills and find different avenues that she can go into. And we've got Michael, who is absolutely amazing, and he wants to go into the television industry. And he's very talented. He's so talented and so nice, and he's so smart. And everything that he's learned here, he's definitely put it to use in his placement, and we've seen the results. And we've got Lizette, who's absolutely lovely. She's a little firecracker. She wants to go into the social media aspects of things, and she's absolutely amazing. She's got the eye of the tiger. She's very, very on it when it comes to social media trends. We absolutely love her.
I'm going to have to interrupt you because there's another program starting in a couple of minutes, and I need to squeeze in. I need to squeeze in a little bit more. Can you also, without the foundation, without the Andy Taylor Foundation and these interventions, you and your fellow students would have really struggled to make these sort of connections, right? It's not like you can phone up a friend of your mum's and ask for some work experience or something like that, which is, of course, that was the difference between me and Andy. It's what he used to tease me about, is that, I thought I struggled to get into the media, but compared to the kind of people the foundation has been set up to help, I had it really easy. You wouldn't have been able to get these sort of connections without the support of the foundation.
Yeah, most definitely. Without the support of the foundation, I don't think I would have had the doors that have been opened up to me. As much as we tried, it's not easy to be able to get into certain rooms or speak to certain people. But by way of the Andy Taylor Foundation and everyone that we've met here from the course directors, we've been able to get that experience and open up the doors that we never thought we could.
Quick text from Matty in Rochdale, just texted to say up the Dale. Laura, how can people find out more about the foundation and possibly even make a donation? Because we are hoping to be doing things like this for a very long time, aren't we?
Yeah, so the Andy Taylor Foundation is on Facebook, it's on LinkedIn, and if I'm allowed to, a personal plug for Andy's young son, Freddie, who is 12, who is about to run a Tough Mudder course with 9 of his friends, and their fundraising page is open on Crowdfunder on the Andy Taylor Foundation page. It's already had some lovely support, but it'll be really meaningful to him.
And I will tweet that from my soon-to-be 1 million followers Twitter account. I thought I'd just slip that in while we're talking about digital media. Divine, Divine, I've got some very bad news for you, actually.
Oh, no.
I think I've been asked to mentor you for the next bit.
That's not bad news. Why would you say that? He's joking.
I'll see you soon. Divine Vicat, Laura Taylor, many thanks indeed. You can find out more about the Andy Taylor Foundation by going to their website. That's it from me for another week. I'm going to give myself a big pat on the back for not getting too emotional during that, because that is a charity we've set up in I got to go.
You've got to go. You've got to go. I know the feeling. Thanks very much, James. 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 Feeling. Thanks very much, James.